So, yeah, I ended up watching this movie. I really intended to keep my word with not watching this movie, but unfortunately, I was convinced to watching the movie, and oh my gosh, I regret it immediately. This movie is not good. As I predicted it would happen, I knew this movie was going to be terrible because I hated Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, there was no way I was going to like this movie after hating that garbage TV show. So I knew I wasn't going to like this movie whatsoever. Now, is this movie the worst thing of the MCU? No. It is not the worst film of the modern MCU, or the MCU as some people on the internet call it, which I fully agree with that term. I think it is very accurate. But is it the best movie of the MCU Phase 4 and 5? Abso-freaking-lutely not. This movie is so unbelievably painful and boring. Like, the only reason I watched this movie was because a friend of mine had it illegally. So, we watched it on an illegal site to see how bad the movie is. And we both agreed that there was no way this movie was going to be good whatsoever, so it made sense to just chuckle around and make fun of the garbage movie. But unfortunately, the movie itself, as I said before, is very boring. And the only redeeming thing about the movie is, in my opinion, is me and my friend had a great time making fun of it. That's about it. But anyway, we might as well get to the plot of the garbage movie. So the movie opens up with the MCU logo. Now, originally I would skip this logo, but unfortunately I have to talk about it since it's a different variation of it. Now, I hate this variation of the logo. Now, I could see somebody complaining, oh, that's because you don't like change. Well, no, that's not the case. It's just, it's so unbelievably dull. Like, where is the color of this movie? Now, yes, I know that this movie is about, like, some sort of secret plot that's going to overturn the world, or at least that's the attempt of the villains, but where is the gosh darn color? It looks so dull. Just like this movie. Like, when you go to the MCU logos, like for every film, even the garbage ones in Phase 4 and 5 until this movie, the logos are still memorable to this day. Like, you could even switch around some things with the logo and change it up. I don't have a problem with change, but at the same time, you should stick to the format that you stuck with. Like, the movies of the MCU are supposed to be colorful. Now, this logo right here with black and white could work for another franchise, or even another Marvel universe. Better yet, this would have probably been a better logo for that upcoming Spider-Noir show that's coming out on Amazon Prime, which I am totally excited for. Hopefully it's good and not bad, but we'll see about that. Anyway, continuing on, then we transition to President Ross, who is announcing the victory of their election and how they need to keep everything amazing, and his slogan, together. Man, this is the most generic political campaign ever. Like, together. That's all you can come up with a slogan. Together. That's it. When you make a political slogan for your campaign in an election of politics, you gotta make sure the slogan catches people's attention. That's a part of a political campaign. Now, for example, for Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton, their slogan was, "Make America Great Again." And then when we come to Joe Biden, his slogan was Build Back Better. Regardless of how you feel about the politicians or the slogans themselves, you have to admit that both the slogans did catch their audience very, very well. Where together wouldn't catch anyone. Like, together what? What are we doing together? You could have made something like Stay Together or Stronger Together, like any slogan, like seriously. But then we transition to the news media, which is criticizing President Ross because of previous things that he did, which we even get to see Harrison Ford with a mustache, which is very, very interesting. And we get a mention of Hulk, like the movie Hulk, that was made back, I think it was in 2003, after so many years. Now, they've been slowly reintroducing the Hulk movie or Hulk characters back into the MCU. Like, first they did it with Abomination and Shang-Chi and She-Hulk. And now we're getting all these mentions of characters from the movie, especially Hulk's ex-girlfriend in the movie. We get to even see a photo of her, which I won't hold this against Disney because Universal owns the right to the Hulk films, and it is not their fault that they have not been able to make a Hulk movie for the MCU because Universal refused to work with them at the time. Now, if it was working with them now, I completely understand what the direction Disney has taken the franchise, but back then they should have done something with the Hulk because, A, the MCU didn't become the abomination that it is now, and also there would have been really interesting plot lines you could have brought into the MCU, which is going to be brought up in this film, which, again, we'll get back into later in the film. So continuing on, we get to see Captain Falcon.
Yeah, cry about it. I'm not calling him Captain America. Steve Rogers is Captain America.
In a plane where he's about to do a secret mission. He jumps out of the plane, and then we get to see an action scene, which, oof, this action sucks. Like, it really sucks. When the show action looks better, you know you messed up. Like, a show isn't supposed to be as good as a movie. Now, yes, you could have shows with really good budgets. Like, for example, the Daredevil series has really good action, even though the MCU has a way bigger budget than Daredevil. Like, when you make a TV show versus a movie, you kind of want to make sure you don't make your TV show too expensive where it could end up hurting the show in the process. We've seen this before, especially in modern times, because people like Disney keep throwing too much money in. Now, a movie should still have a decent budget as well, but granted, it should be higher than a show budget, but not the budget that this movie actually had. But continuing on, as Captain Falcon keeps fighting off the soldiers, the people behind the scenes are like, wait, how did Cap do that? Or something like that. I can't entirely remember. And this one guy mentions that it was a gift from the Wakandans for helping him out, and also that the packaging, like the bubble wrap and stuff, was even made out of vibranium, which this joke wasn't funny at all. I am so unbelievably sick of MCU humor. It's not funny anymore. It used to be funny back in the day, but unfortunately, this humor has aged poorly over the years, and a lot of people, including myself, have gotten sick of it, and they're not even doing it right. Like, it's so unbelievably cringe. Like, before, the MCU humor was tame. It didn't ruin every single moment, but unfortunately, this movie and the projects in these two phases have an issue with their MCU humor with actually deconstructing everything and making it pointless. I'm looking at you, Loki, with that stupid Infinity Stone joke. I hated that joke. I am done with it. That's why I've been going back to the older Marvel movies, is because those movies don't have that humor. So, why don't we continue back on with the movie? So, Falcon does some more fighting, or Captain Falcon, I should say, and then we get to meet the new Falcon of the MCU, which I wasn't a huge fan of his character whatsoever. Like, his whole introduction, he was coming off cool, like he was awesome and stuff. And then he just started, like, going, woohoo, yeah, and like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Another one of these. Can we have a serious character in the MCU again? I'm so sick of these comic relief characters in the MCU. Now, yes, there's nothing wrong with having a comic relief character in a film or a show, but when you have so many of them in the same franchise, it's not funny. Now, I'm okay with like 1 or 2 comic reliefs in a franchise, but you gotta be very, very careful with your comic relief, especially when it comes to a franchise like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, the reason Phase 1 through 3 worked was because there were only a few characters that were funny in the MCU, and they chose their jokes very carefully, instead of like every 10 seconds, like these modern movies have been doing.
It would be a nice breath of fresh air from what the MCU has been doing. We have not had a serious character in the MCU in so long.
To get a character in the MCU that wasn't a joke, it would be nice. A serious character again. We need this. But anyway, continuing on. After Captain Falcon finishes his mission, Captain Falcon meets up with President Ross, and Ross talks to Falcon about rebuilding the Avengers, which, of course, Falcon's like, what about the Soviet Accords? Ross is like, I'm in charge now, so it's fine. I have more control over things, so we can reassemble the Avengers, which in itself is a cool plot line, to reassemble the Avengers after that whole situation in Captain America Civil War. But it seems weird that Ross is the one who wants to reassemble the Avengers, especially since he was the one who suggested this whole thing to begin with, which ended up causing the Civil War in that movie. So it's strange to hear it, and a bit hypocritical if you also think about it. Of course, Captain Falcon and the new Falcon go to the house or hideout of Captain Falcon's friend from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Isaiah Bradley, which, if you don't remember who he was the guy that America experimented on being like a Captain America type figure, but of course he wasn't accepted in because he was not the right skin color, which they ended up abandoning him, and also made the comment that a black man would never be Captain America, which unbelievably frustrated me when I heard that scene, because we knew what they were implying by that. They were implying to the fans that personally didn't think Falcon was not a good fit for Captain America in the MCU, which, to be fair, I still stick with that point, not because, oh, he's of different color of me, so he can be Captain America. No, the context of him being Captain America in the MCU makes absolutely no sense, which we'll get into that later. But anyway, Captain Falcon and the new Falcon are having a good time with Isaiah until Captain Falcon receives a text from the president, and Isaiah gets mad, so Captain Falcon decides to follow him, and they start discussing, and he decides to invite Isaiah along to the infight into the White House, which then we eventually transition to the White House, where it's like a good time. Cap, Isaiah, and the new Falcon are just having a good time in a limo. Then they go in the White House. Man, this is the first time the White House has ever been this occupied. The White House is one of those buildings that not a lot of people are in, or at least the amount of people that are in the White House. But continuing on, we eventually meet up with Ross again. Ross reveals that the material that was retrieved was
adamantium.
Now, the reason I had Siri read that because I was having issues pronouncing that word while recording this, so I figured make it easier, have Siri read it. Now, for the casuals that are like, man, that sounds familiar. What is that stuff? What's the stuff that Wolverine's bones are made out of? So, now we have the confirmation of adamantium in the MCU, which is a whole problem of itself. And you're probably wondering, how is that a problem? Well, you see, if the adamantium is introduced now into the MCU, like they literally just discovered it, like it recently just entered Earth's atmosphere, because for context, the adamantium is from the Celestial that landed in Eternals. But the problem is, if this was literally introduced just now into the MCU, like it falling into space in Phase 4, we got a big problem, because the problem with this is the character of Wolverine, especially since they're planning to introduce Wolverine into the MCU, or the X-Men in general, Wolverine is 100 years old. So, how would a Wolverine work in the MCU timeline? Now, I could see someone going like, but that's because Disney didn't own the rights to X-Men. That's why they had to do it now. Well, you could have done something better to introduce this item. And also, unlike the Eternals, Wolverine would have been easy to introduce to the MCU and explain why he wasn't there, unlike the Eternals. It would have made slightly more sense if they did it right, but they didn't. And now it just opens what they're going to do with the character of Wolverine. Are they going to have it accurate to the comics, or are they going to say he's like a 40-year-old in the modern times, and he somehow gets his abilities from like bit by an adamantium spider or something? Of course I'm over-exaggerating, but you get my point. Like, there was a way to introduce Wolverine and adamantium into the MCU without making it a part of the Celestial. You could have done something that could have made sense to the universe and be more faithful to the character, but this creates a whole problem, because who knows what's going to happen with Wolverine in the MCU timeline. Now, yes, I know there's a Wolverine from the Deadpool universe, but it still doesn't matter. That's not the MCU Wolverine. And especially, this is a key detail to worry about or to question, because it sounds like after Phase 5 of the MCU, it's going to take a break from the Avengers and focus on the X-Men. So, what are they going to do with that? Opens too many questions into the continuity, especially since the MCU has the audacity to call itself 616, which all the normies will not know is the comic book universe that Stan Lee had pre-established. Even though the MCU used to have its own number in the Marvel universe, but of course the shills don't know this, or they choose to ignore it because it's no longer canon. Even though it pre-established a previous number, but then Marvel's just like, oh, just to appeal to comic book fans, let's call it 616. Yeah! Even though it had its own number. Like, what is Marvel thinking? But anyway, let's continue on before I blow a head gasket over this situation. So, President Ross keeps going on how they're in negotiations with Japan on the Celestial, which has the antimanium inside. But, of course, at the wrong time, Isaiah tries to assassinate President Ross, and Isaiah jumps out of the window of the White House. And once Captain Falcon follows Isaiah outside of the White House, he suddenly comes back and he's like, I don't remember anything of what just happened. The last thing I remember, we went to the limo, we did the White House, and everything went blank. So then they arrest Isaiah, and then we transition to
the presidential bunker.
And Captain Falcon is completely angry and starts shoving soldiers so he can talk to President Ross. But then when he comes in, President Ross is like, let him in. He's allowed in. So then Captain Falcon and President Ross then decide to have an argument because of Isaiah's arrest, even though this arrest is completely justified, even though he doesn't remember it or not. Because earlier in the movie, when Isaiah and Captain Falcon had issues on the president, like, Captain Falcon said that he probably should work with the president of the United States since he is representing America.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, supposedly representing America. Alright, all jokes aside, if you didn't hear about the controversy before this movie released, Anthony Mackie, the one who plays Falcon or Captain Falcon in this movie, said that Captain America shouldn't represent America. Now, the clip has been taken to a bit of an extreme. I get what he was trying to say, but at the same time, the creation of the character of Captain America was to represent America. Of course, he's not going to have every single ideology, but Captain America's character shares a lot of traits with the American dream and the message of America. So it's kind of disgraceful that he said that. Of course, it's not a race thing. I remember talking to someone and said they're just overplaying it because of racism. Chris Evans said the same thing a while back, and back then, yes, there weren't commentators on political issues, but if Chris Evans had said the exact same thing at this time like Anthony Mackie did, they would totally call him out for it. So don't even play that with me. But now they're having issues because of this one incident, and President Ross is going like, we can't take any risks or anything like that because he tried assassinating him. And then we transition where the news is talking about that Isaiah is getting the frickin' death penalty. Dang, that was fast and unrealistic. The death penalty is only for extreme situations, and no, presidential assassinations do not count. Let's see what it says for the death penalty in America. So it says, to receive the death penalty in the United States, a defendant must be convicted of a capital offense, and a jury must recommend the death penalty. The federal government and many states have the authority to impose the death penalty. So you have to do something pretty extreme. An assassination attempt is not the case. Like, look at the recent assassination attempts recently in America. So, one assassin gets killed, obviously, for trying to kill the president of the United States, or the former president at the time. And then the second attempt at a golf course, he manages to get caught and gets thrown in jail instead of getting the death penalty. So assassinations do not count for the death. To prove that assassination attempts don't really qualify for the death penalty, I went ahead and looked more into the person who tried to kill Ronald Reagan. Of course, this person
being John Hinckley Jr., who tried killing Ronald Reagan when he was first inaugurated. And even he didn't get the death penalty. Because when I looked more into it, I know he's still around to this day, but it says John Hinckley Jr. was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent more than 35 years in a psychiatric hospital after attempting to assassinate President Ronald Reagan in 1981. He was released in 2016 with conditions, and all restrictions were lifted in 2022. So yeah, the death penalty does not work for assassination attempts. So let's move on. When the U.S. results to the death penalty, because America as a country, even though a lot of people pretend it's not the case or ignore that it's the case, we have a very fair law system. Like, we give good trials where, unlike other countries, you could just literally convict anyone of anything without any evidence. That was part of the reason that our founding fathers left Britain, was because of their unjust law systems. So they left and made a more fair system that protects anyone from being accused of something that they didn't do and having a lawyer by their side to defend them. Like, the point where we're resulting to the death penalty is unrealistic, especially how fast it happens. Now, I could understand if there's like a title card, but granted, it would have also been cool to see a bit of a court scene, so we get to see our... You know what? Actually, no, I changed my mind, because then they would make it She-Hulk bad. Never mind. The title card would have been fine, but we don't get one. So, continuing on, Falcon decides to do his own investigation, even though he is friends with Isaiah, and that kind of conflicts with something like that. But he just decides to do it anyway. And, of course, Falcon is looking all over the place and asking questions. Captain Falcon is like, maybe he's being mind-controlled like my friend Bucky. So Falcon begins his investigation. He's just driving in a truck where he is immediately attacked by the same military guy from the beginning of the movie, which this military character turns out to be Seth Volker, which, funny enough, he looks nothing like his comic book version, which some of the people who defend the MCU nowadays are comic book fans, like hardcore, like, they did it in the comics, so that means it's completely justified. But then we get examples like this, where they don't follow the comic books, and all the shills aren't questioning it, they're just like, it's fine. It drives me nuts. It really does. So, he tries killing Captain Falcon in his ride, kind of similar to how Hydra was trying to kill Nick Fury in Captain America Winter Soldier, which I'm going to throw this out there. This movie is definitely ripping off movies from the MCU. So, let me explain why I'm saying this. So, Super Soldier gets brainwashed, tries killing a world leader, and then also doesn't remember said thing, and also the secret operation is trying to kill him. Now, it's not just Winter Soldier they rip off. They kind of rip off Civil War as well, with the assassination attempt on a leader. But granted, that movie did it way better. And then killing someone in their vehicle with the secret government thing was obviously from Winter Soldier. So, yeah, when I watch this, I'm like, are we seriously ripping off a movie from this franchise? Like, seriously? What's up with Disney films ripping off their own franchises? It's not funny. Anyway,
Captain Falcon and Volker begin to fight it out, where eventually Volker gets stabbed by his own knife and gets knocked out by Captain Falcon, where at some point Captain Falcon gets a phone call to meet up with the main villain of the movie. Then we transition to Air Force One, where President Ross is working out, and one of his assistants comes in to meet up with him, where it turns out they're coming to Japan to discuss the trade of the antimanium. And, of course, Japan is like the only country in this treaty that Ross wants to sign, where everyone gets a fair share of the antimanium. But, of course, the Japan leader is like, you stole the antimanium from us to give it back to us. Ross is confused by this, but then he's handed a dossier where he's like, you can't be serious, you can't be actually believing this. Meanwhile, we go back to Sam and Joaquin, or I should say Captain Falcon and the new Falcon, go to a secret base where we get to find out who is the main villain of this and who's been pulling the strings of these secret operations. And of course, it is Leader. From the first Hulk movie, the one at the end credit scene, the big-headed guy from Marvel. So, yeah, not only does this movie steal Red Hulk, a Hulk villain, it also steals Leader, another Hulk villain, for this Captain America movie. Now, if you wanted to continue the plot line of the first Incredible Hulk movie, that's fine, but do it in his own movie, gosh darn it. I would complain that they should have done this plot point sooner, but again, I don't blame Disney for this one. I blame Universal for holding the rights to the Hulk movies and refusing to work with Disney at the time. And it seems like Universal is being more open to working with Disney now, especially since Incredible Hulk is now available on Disney+, and especially since they're referencing these characters from that movie. So, continuing on, Leader reveals that Ross had taken him to build these secret weapons for his operation, and he was going to free him, but he chose not to, and Leader wants revenge to destroy Ross's legacy, and says that he has everything in his grasp. Which, why don't we talk about Leader real quick? What did they do to you? Man, this looks terrible. Why does Marvel keep messing up these characters? This is like the second or third character, or even more, that they take a character from the comics and do a really bad job making them look like what they're supposed to. Now, it turns out that there's concept art of the Leader that makes him more accurate to the comic books, which I don't even know why they didn't go with this version. This looks way better instead of the broccoli head that they turned him into. He looks like a VeggieTales zombie, to be honest. So we get to find out his plan to put the world into conflict with each other, mostly America and Japan, to destroy Ross's legacy. So then Leader escapes, and Falcon and Captain Falcon fight these military guys. Well, Leader is presenting his plan. Meanwhile, then out of nowhere, the girl from earlier who was with Ross, or should I say formerly known as Captain Israel, which turns out to be a former X-Men member, looking more into it, she comes in, but of course she manages to beat up these guys who are way taller than her. Now, I did hear she has cancer, or had cancer at a very young age, so I'll give her credit for trying her best, but at the same time, it is so unrealistic to have a woman this short
beat men who are taller than her. It is unrealistic. So then the three leave where they're automatically arrested. But then out of nowhere, the walkie starts playing the song that controlled Isaiah. And of course the song, now hearing it, is Blue Sky. You know, from the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie. So they activate, and the three manage to take down the officers and start heading to find more information about the plan, where Sam is interrogating Seth Vulgar about the information about Japan and the Antimanium and Leader's plan. And Seth Vulgar reveals that he fabricated papers that say the U.S. stole the antimantium from Japan. And the plot is pretty obvious when you put it together. Oh, also, bonus point, Bucky shows up in this scene. I was actually shocked that they had Bucky in here. He was probably one of the few reshoots of the movie, was throwing Bucky in there as a cameo, because he's never really mentioned again, except for that one scene, which sucks. But anyway, continuing on with the plot, we go back to Air Force One with President Ross, and he has decided to forget the peace treaty and gather every single piece of antimanium and claim it for the U.S. so they're the most powerful source in the earth. So Japan and the U.S. start fighting over the antimanium, and then Ross gets a call from Leader, and Leader says that I'm going to destroy your legacy. You promised me this, but you never held up. And Ross is trying to explain to him why he shouldn't do it, but of course it's not working. And of course at the same time, Ross has run out of the mints, which I forgot was a key detail. He has mints or pills that he takes, which now we know is connected to Leader. And then also Leader uses the music to mind control the air soldiers to make the situation more extreme than it needed to be. And then at the same time, both the Falcons come in to stop the situation and stop Leader's plan by taking down all the jets. We get a cool fight in the air. It's cool. Probably the coolest scene for action that we've gotten in this movie. And then at some point, Ross makes it back to the White House to give a speech, and the military soldiers are trying to stop Leader, where we get this one big guy that was tasked to deal with Leader's plan, but he gets killed automatically. And then once President Ross makes it to the press conference, he begins talking about the situation with the antimanium and the Celestial and their whole plans and a bunch of rumors that are beginning to spread. But then audio messages are leaked to the public between Leader and Ross, and his Secret Service assistants are trying to get him out of there. But he wants to explain what happened, which, of course, them denying that makes him even more angry, and Red Hulk is then unleashed. What took so long? Like, this is the longest villain introduction ever. And at some point, they capture Leader. Of course, it was before Red Hulk was unleashed. It went back and forth. But then Captain Falcon fights up with Red Hulk, and they duke it out. And I'll say I'm actually surprised. Falcon would have lost if it wasn't for certain factors. And even the film acknowledges that Red Hulk could have instantly killed him if he wanted to. But anyway, Falcon and Red Hulk fight, and
At some point, Red Hulk rips out one of Captain Falcon's wings and is about to lose until there is an airstrike. And then the movie is starting to wrap up now. Captain Falcon is removed from the rubble, but then Red Hulk comes in, but then somehow Captain Falcon manages to calm him down, and he goes back to Harrison Ford, or Ross, I should say. And then we go to prison, or some sort of container, where Falcon is meeting up with Ross, where then we get to meet, like, Ross's daughter or something like that. And that's how the movie ends. And then also we get an end credits scene with Leader revealing that something bigger is coming and you cannot stop it, which is referring to the whole multiverse thing. And that's the movie. Man, this movie was boring. It was so boring I was even struggling to remember what even happened in the movie. This movie, not as bad as some of the other flops by Marvel, but it is still pretty bad of a movie, and it was a huge waste of time. I wish I didn't see this movie. I wish I could have wasted my time with an actual good movie, but oh well. But if I had to rate this movie, it's 2 out of 10. This movie could have worked, but at the same time, there's a lot of things holding it back. One of them was the reshoots, which you can tell when you watch the movie, that the movie is not structured very well. Like, there are things that make sense, and then others things that contradict previous things. Like, one example for the death penalty, there's one scene where they mention the death penalty, and then the other one is they're considering the death penalty, which makes absolutely no sense. And this is what happens when you do reshoots at last second, because your budget gets higher, and then also, once your date gets closer and closer, it's too late to fix the movie to make it even better. But, of course, they're not going to listen to us. We're not the film experts. So, yeah, in the end, this movie is suffering. It's failing in the box office. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's actually the lowest Captain America movie on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's saying something because no one cares about Rotten Tomatoes anymore. It is a rigged site. But anyway, if I had to rate this movie, I would give it a 2 out of 10. This movie was boring. Had some good moments, like some action scenes near the end, but the movie overall is boring. It was a waste of time. But anyway, this is D to the B, signing off.